What's up again, everybody? Last time we shined a spotlight on a hero in Flesh and Blood, we talked about Katsu and the ninja class, my personal favorite. Now let's talk about the hero and class that I have the most cards from. This is Rhinar the Brute. In the world of Flesh and Blood, brutes are very similar to orcs. Big, burly, and designed to hit you hard. Rhinar has 40 health, 4 intellect, and an ability that reads, when you discard a card with 6 or more attack during your action phase, Intimidate. And Intimidate is a keyword that means target hero banishes a face-down random card from their hand. At the beginning of their end phase, return all cards banished this way to their owner's hands. So a few things about this ability. Unlike Katsu's once per turn effect, Rhinar's ability is usable more than once and triggers anytime you meet the requirement. Furthermore, his ability encourages you to build your deck in a specific way to take advantage of it. I should slow down and talk about why this ability is good though. Anytime you Intimidate, you select your opponent, take one of their cards from their hand at random, and put it to the side. That card, by virtue of being banished, cannot be used to block or pitch to pay costs for defense reactions. Your opponent now only has 3 cards from hand, which they can use to pay costs and block, making your attacks much more difficult to weather. Now imagine intimidating twice on a turn, lowering your opponent's hand to 2. This is one of the ways you can build a Rhinar deck. Intimidate your opponent's hand, make it very difficult for them to block, and put your opponent in really tough positions where they may have to block with cards that they really wanted to use against you. Now let's take a look at Rhinar's weapon, the Romping Club. Romping Club is a 2-handed brute club that has a 4 attack and once per turn action that says pay 2 resources and attack. It also has a once per turn effect that says when you discard a card with 6 or more attack, Romping Club gains 1 attack until the end of the turn. So essentially, if you discard a 6 attack card, Romping Club all of a sudden attacks for 5 instead of 4, and Rhinar's ability is also going to trigger and intimidate a card away from them. If you can't tell, you're going to see a lot of cards in Brute that look to trigger that Intimidate in one way, shape, or form. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at the common and rare cards in Brute. Now normally when I think of like big scary monsters that want to hit for tons of damage like Rhinar does, I'd expect their cards to be really expensive, but in actuality, the average cost of these common and rare cards is only like 1.3. Because most of these cards cost 1 or 2 resources to play, you should be capable of playing multiple cards in a turn rather than only pitching and playing like 1 card. Now the caveat here is that many of these cards offset that low cost by having you pay an additional cost, discarding a card from your hand. Now this is a double-edged sword as well. On one hand, you're losing a card at random, which could be the very thing that you desperately wanted to play this turn. On the other hand, if you built your deck right, you're discarding a 6 attack card and you're triggering Rhinar's Intimidate ability, removing potential blockers from your opponent. So looking at the card types, you'll see that Brute has 3 action cards in the common and rare slots: Barraging Beatdown, Awakening Bellow, and Primeval Bellow. And of those 3, Barraging Beatdown and Awakening Bellow both have the Intimidate keyword printed on the card. With the keyword printed straight onto the card, you don't actually have to discard to trigger it. You just play the card and take away one of your opponent's cards for a turn. It's pretty sweet. You'll also notice that all of the cards shown here are the red versions, and all of their attack actions have 6 or more attack. This means that if you discarded one of these cards from your hand to fulfill another's cost, they will trigger Rhinar's Intimidate. It's guaranteed. There are also cards that give an added benefit to discarding cards with 6 or more attack, like Savage Feast and Breakneck Battery here. So let's shift over to the super rares and the mythics now. Starting from the left, we have the mythic card Alpha Rampage. It costs 3 to play and it requires you to discard a card. If you can pay those steep prices, then it'll intimidate 1 card from your opponent, as well as obviously triggering the Rhinar ability, so possibly intimidating 2 cards, and it attacks for 9. 9 damage, and possibly removing 2 cards from your opponent's hand is nothing to scoff at. Blood Rush Bellow is a brute action that costs 1 to play, as well as discarding a card, and if you do, then your next brute attack, either action attack or weapon attack, will gain +2 attack. In addition to that, if you play this and discard a 6 attack or higher card, then you get to draw 2 cards and this action gains go again. Now it's important to note that if you don't discard a 6 attack card with this, then your turn is likely just to be over, as you've used the action point that you have on playing Blood Rush Bellow. That might seem risky, but it gets a little bit less worrisome when you see the legendary equipment and other cards that are in Rhinar's class. The super rare cards start off with Bonehead Barrier, a 1-cost instant card. Instant cards can be played on either player's turn by paying the cost and playing it down. Instants don't take up an action point to play, and this instant allows you to roll a die and prevent damage based on the number that you roll. Reckless Swing is a 0-cost defense reaction that defends for 4, and it also pitches blue, which is really good. Even though it costs 0, you can kind of think of this as a defense reaction that costs a card from hand, which is very similar to other defense reactions that require you to pitch cards to cover the cost. Now, there is a small upside on the card that basically allows you to deal 2 damage if you end up discarding a card that has 6 or more attack, but that's sort of negligible. Really, you're just looking at this as a slightly cheaper version of some of those defense reactions that you might play already. Sand Sketch Plan also costs 0 and pitches blue. It's an action card that lets you tutor for any card in your deck. The downside to this amazing upside is that you have to immediately discard a card from your hand after drawing the card you chose, meaning you could grab that card that you really want and then just discard it away. However, if you manage to toss a 6 attack card, then you get 2 action points out of it, allowing you to attack with any remaining cards from hand or with your club, so that's not bad. All right, on to the equipment. Bark Bone Strapping is a brute chest piece that has an instant effect. You destroy it, you roll a 6-sided die, and you gain resources equal to half of what you rolled. That's pretty sick, but honestly, I've played this several times, and for some reason, every time I use the effect, I roll a 1. This ends up netting you 0 resources and making you just incredibly salty. And finally, we have the legendary brute equipment. This is Scab Skin Leathers. This can be used once a turn, and when you use it, you roll a die and gain action points equal to half of what you rolled. So long as you don't roll a 1, you're getting at least an extra action point out of this thing. It's absolutely sick. Finally, let's look at a few tournament reports and see where Rhinar falls. Looking at the results of the most recent calling event, the Calling Austin, we see that although the sealed portion was made up of 32% Rhinar players, there were 0 Rhinar players that advanced out of the sealed round and into the top 8. However, in a recent 15-person December tournament at Bay Dragon Games in Auckland, there was a player that did take 2nd place overall with Rhinar, and that was a constructed level event. So that's the Brute class. Similar to Ninja, I feel like Rhinar fits nicely as a constructed level hero, but can be a little bit more difficult to work with in sealed. When your goal is to use that Intimidate ability to make things hard on your opponent, you're either going to need a lot of class cards that have Intimidate already on them, or you're going to need a bunch of 6 attack cards that you discard to trigger the Rhinar effect. In limited formats, just like Ninja, those can sometimes just pass you on by. So what do you think of Rhinar? Are you a fan of the Brute class? I plan to build a Brute deck myself, as I've got just a bunch of the super rares and mythics. For some reason, that's what I've pulled the most of. Let me know what you'd like to see next. Sound off in a comment below. And if you like these videos, please consider subscribing and sharing this with your local friends, with your local group. Spread the word about this sweet game. As always, thanks for watching.